My 18-year-old daughter, Emily, and I watched as my wife, Tiffany, and her 25-year-old boss, Ryan, loaded her suitcases into his car. He'd arrived Sunday morning to collect her for a Monday meeting in Los Angeles. Their flight was scheduled for that evening, requiring them to be in town for preliminary discussions before some crucial negotiations. Tiffany, still stunning at 44 after 25 years of marriage, stood a statuesque 5'7" with dark brown hair and piercing blue eyes. Despite gaining a few pounds over the years, she retained the slender, curvy physique that always drew attention. We married straight out of high school, and I worked tirelessly to put her through college, taking online classes myself. Childbirth hadn't altered her appearance, and after she graduated law school, we returned to Alamance County to be closer to family. By then, we had 2 children, and Emily arrived during Tiffany's first year as an attorney. I observed Ryan with a churning unease, resenting his arrogant smirk and the self-assured way he carried himself. I yearned to confront him, but I refrained, knowing it would be futile. They were ostensibly leaving for some civil case, but thanks to a tip from a woman named Rachel, I knew the truth. I'd already been informed about their real intentions. Tiffany and Ryan had declined our offer of a ride to the airport, opting for the privacy of his car. It bothered me that I was unaware of their return date. Physically, Ryan and I were similar, close in age, height, and build, and I was prepared for a confrontation if necessary. Emily sensed my escalating anger and wisely intervened, preventing me from doing something I might regret. We waved goodbye from the porch, as Tiffany most likely anticipated whatever awaited her in Los Angeles. Tiffany's promotion to associate partner 2 years prior had drastically changed our lives for the worse. The power went to her head, though she concealed it from everyone except me. It was Rachel, Ryan's wife, who had contacted me, revealing his history of infidelity with women at the firm. She claimed this was the final straw, and that she and her father had orchestrated a trap. After Ryan's car finally disappeared down the street, Emily and I went back inside. "Does Mom have any clue we know what's going on?" Emily asked. "That Ryan's just adding her to his list?" "Probably not," I responded. "Your mom's always been oblivious to the truth. Even with her legal training, she dismisses rumors and thinks she's in control. To her, it's probably just an exciting escape from routine. She'll be in for a rude awakening when she realizes she's just another conquest." Emily frowned. "So why didn't you stop her if you knew?" "You know your mom," I replied. "If I'd tried to warn her, she'd have dismissed it, accused me of jealousy. It would have escalated into a huge argument, and nothing would have changed her mind." "Does his wife know?" Emily inquired. "Yeah, she knows. And her dad, too," I confirmed. "They're ready to catch him red-handed. It's not his first time, and Rachel's had enough. Her kids are grown, and she's done with the charade." "Will you forgive Mom?" Emily asked, looking concerned. "Not this time," I said firmly. "I forgave her once, but this is different. It's time to move on. Divorce has been on the table since she left this morning." I'll never forget the shock on my daughter's face. Like her siblings, she was clueless about her mother's past. Learning about her infidelity clearly hit her hard. "Dad, you've got to explain," she urged. "I don't get it." "You're the youngest, Emily, so keep this between us," I said. "Before you were born, your mom cheated. She kept it hidden until she got pregnant. If a test hadn't confirmed you were mine, I would have left. Luckily, the paternity test proved you were." Emily looked stunned. Only 3 people in the world had known the secret, and we'd kept it buried for years. "Who is he? Do we know him?" she asked. "It's been 18 years since I spoke to him," I replied. "Your Uncle Rick. You and the other kids call him Uncle Rick." Emily took a moment to absorb this revelation. She now understood why I always kept my distance from family gatherings with Rick, why her grandparents split Christmas between him and me. It all clicked into place. "You could text Rick about Tiffany's trip and stir things up if you want," I joked lightly. Then I went to the kitchen, brewed some coffee, and grabbed the local paper, scanning for new listings, rentals, houses. With Emily heading to college soon, Tiffany could stay in our house until she graduated. But I needed to move out before her return. I knew Judge Wallace would prioritize the kids' needs in the divorce, so I had to plan ahead. Emily's phone buzzed, and she spoke quietly for a bit. Uncle Rick confessed to everything, she told me later. He feels for you and wants to talk. After 18 years, I figured it might be time to hear his side of the story. Tiffany's actions had forced me to revisit the past, and though I felt betrayed, I'd stayed for the kids, hoping to keep our home intact. Grabbing a bottle of bourbon, I asked Emily to drive me to meet Rick. We had our usual spot, an old fishing hole on our father's land. Sitting by the fire, passing the bottle between us, Rick laid it all out. His version differed from Tiffany's, but I figured the truth lay somewhere in between. In the end, I didn't care anymore. Hearing Rick take responsibility was enough. I placed more of the blame on Tiffany. Rick had always been more of a follower than a leader. At some point, our father spotted the fire and, thinking we were trespassing teenagers, confronted us with an old rifle, but surprisingly gave us a lift back to the farmhouse in Rick's truck. Mom, as always, made eggs and potatoes to help us sober up, a familiar remedy from our childhood. By the time we'd finished, she'd already contacted Emily and Rick's wife, Mary. When they showed up, we were in slightly better condition. Mary, who married Rick after my parents' divorce, seemed bewildered to find us all together. "So you two finally buried the hatchet," Mary remarked. "After all this time, we deserve to know what caused the rift." I started to explain, but Rick nudged me, a silent signal to stay mum, just like old times. Rick was always the smooth talker, adept at getting us out of sticky situations. But this time, I was mistaken. Tiffany and I, Rick confessed, had an affair while she was pregnant with Emily. He took full responsibility, admitting his immaturity and foolishness back then. My younger brother, Marcus, always the more sensible one, had discovered us, and from that point on, considered me dead to him. Hearing the truth about our estrangement, Dad exclaimed, "Damn, if I were Marcus, I'd have washed my hands of you." Mom inquired, "What finally made you come clean?" I explained Tiffany's trip to Los Angeles with her boss. They'd booked only one hotel room for their entire stay, which understandably aroused suspicion. Rachel, Ryan's wife, hired private investigators. I continued. Emily's aware of what's happening, and it's difficult for her to see her mother so thrilled about this trip. "I should have let you confront him, Dad," my daughter said, meeting my gaze. A brief silence hung in the air before I added, "Since Tiffany's staying at the house while Emily's at college, I need to find a new place before she returns." "Dad, I'm not staying with Mom," Emily declared resolutely. "Wherever you go, I go. We're a team." Emily possessed the same stubbornness I did, and I knew she was unwavering. Mom intervened. "Come upstairs with me, Emily," and they retreated for a private conversation. When they returned, a new course of action had been decided. We'd stay with my parents temporarily, taking only essential belongings. During the drive home, Emily gave me a hard time. "You need to stop defending Mom," she stated. "We're adults now." She knew exactly what she was doing with Ryan in L.A., thinking she wouldn't get caught. That speaks volumes about how she views us. Back home Monday night, we began the slow process of moving our things, each of us selecting cherished possessions, my rocking chair, her makeup table, the TV. Tiffany kept us updated throughout the week, although progress was gradual. Then on Thursday, Rachel called, suggesting a meeting at Jack's Roadhouse around 8 p.m. I arrived in my work attire, sans tie, and recognized Rachel by her white scarf. As we introduced ourselves, I was taken aback by her beauty. She was considerably younger than I'd anticipated, perhaps 10 years my junior, with long blonde hair and gentle blue eyes. Her style was conservative yet attractive. It turned out she was a kindergarten teacher, which accounted for her simple attire. I, on the other hand, worked as an HR manager at a nursing home, hence the more formal dress. Rachel revealed that Tiffany and Ryan would be in Los Angeles through the weekend, and their investigation was approximately 70% complete. Legal papers would be served upon their return. She inquired about my well-being, and I explained that this time felt different. We were addressing the situation openly, unlike the previous instance, which unfolded entirely behind closed doors. I mentioned my older brother Rick's involvement in the earlier affair 18 years prior, before Emily was even born. We hadn't communicated since then until my daughter orchestrated a reconciliation the previous Sunday. That reunion resulted in the worst hangover I'd experienced in years. Rachel chuckled as I recounted how Dad had found us, like a pair of delinquent teenagers, and dragged us home. She found the story amusing, but remarked on how pleasant it must have been to reconnect with family. I told her Emily and I were staying with my parents for the time being and had brought only necessities. I also mentioned my intention to keep Tiffany's number active until Sunday, after which I would block her permanently. Before parting ways, Rachel and I went to a nearby bar and danced for a while. Despite everything, I left feeling surprisingly good. That is, until I arrived home and Emily started teasing, "Daddy's got a new girlfriend," clearly sensing the chemistry between Rachel and me. Sunday dinner was a special occasion. Mom was delighted to cook for us again, and we all enjoyed a hearty meal, leaving little in the way of leftovers. However, around 1 a.m., a phone call startled me awake. It was Rachel, confirming that Tiffany and Ryan had been caught. Hotel detectives had walked in on them, and the entire incident was captured on hidden cameras. She sent me a temporary copy of the video. I got up, dressed, and went downstairs to make tea. Mom joined me as I finished. "Is the water still hot?" she asked. I poured her a cup and showed her the video on my phone. I watched her expression change as the crystal-clear footage played. Tiffany and Ryan were caught undressed in bed, looking like startled deer. Their shocked reactions left no doubt about their illicit activities. Mom swiftly saved a copy of the video to her phone. "We're done with Tiffany," Mom stated firmly. "I can't wait to see the look on her face. Her face when she gets served with the lawsuit." "Emily and I blocked her number that night," I said, reminding Mom we were prepared. She took Tiffany's phone, and I helped her block all communication. Sharing tea with Mom in the middle of the night brought back a comforting sense of nostalgia. Later, I instructed the receptionist at work to block any calls from Tiffany, wanting no further contact. By 11 a.m., the receptionist called. "She's been trying to reach you every 20 minutes. What should we do?" "What's your mobile number?" I asked. She gave it to me, and I replied, "I'm sending you a video clip. If she calls again, ask for her cell number. Once you get it, send her the video and tell her both Emily and I received it last night." That was the last I heard from Tiffany that day. Before leaving, the receptionist confirmed, "I did as you asked." She stopped calling after getting the video. "If you or Emily need anything, just let me know," she added. I nodded my thanks. "Thanks, boss," I muttered, keeping my thoughts private. While Mom prepared dinner and Emily helped in the kitchen, I was briefing my daughter on a work incident when a text arrived from an unfamiliar number, purportedly from my mom, asking me to call. I quickly deduced it was likely Ryan. "I think your brothers might try to contact us around 8 o'clock tonight," I remarked. "Your mom will probably reach out to them by now. They've likely realized we're not at the house. They'll be in for a surprise." Emily chuckled. I left a note for Mom suggesting she might want to have Ryan move out, considering his wife had kicked him out. It's ironic, I mused, because I know Tiffany will never admit the truth to our brothers. "Hey, Dad," Emily suggested. "Let's turn off our phones for a while. That way they'll have to call Mom to figure out what's going on." That's precisely what we did, enjoying a peaceful evening, even if it wasn't so tranquil for others. We later learned my sons had visited the old house after noticing my favorite chair was missing. They searched the entire place. When they found Emily's note in the kitchen, it became clear we'd moved out. Their calls went unanswered, fueling their frustration. Tiffany feigned ignorance, claiming she had no idea what the note meant or where we'd gone. Eventually, they contacted Rick, who insinuated that maybe I didn't want to be found, given what their mother had done. Oddly, they never questioned how Rick knew. As news of our separation spread like wildfire, I received a call at work from my eldest son, Cole, after my secretary connected us. He didn't waste any time after the initial greetings. "So what's up, Dad? Where are you and Emily living now?" "Not much," I replied. "Everything that was wrong is now right and vice versa." "Let's not get into religion, Dad. he sighed. Just give me the facts. Check your texts, I said. I sent you something that'll answer your questions. Forward it to Lloyd. If you want to talk, swing by Grandpa's after dinner. With that, I ended the call, sent the video of Tiffany and Ryan's affair, and notified Emily. Within 10 minutes, Cole responded with a simple, "Wow. I'll be at Grandpa's by 8. My parents excused themselves when Cole and Lloyd arrived, allowing us to discuss the situation privately. My sons didn't see their mother's actions as particularly egregious, advising me to simply move on. We all make mistakes, Dad. Remember how many times you forgave us growing up? This didn't sit well with their sister. You may be my brothers, Emily spat angrily, but you're both idiots. This wasn't an accident. Mom and Ryan planned everything. The hotel was booked as Mr. and Mrs. Ryan for a week before they left. We watched Mom leave the house that Sunday afternoon, knowing she was going to cheat. Dad offered to drive her to the airport, but no, she wanted to show off by leaving with him. We were probably the butt of their jokes all the way to L.A. She had no idea we knew what was going on. Emily turned to me. Why didn't you stop her, Dad? I explained that she would have lied, denied everything. Your mom's actions showed she was already leaving the marriage. This wasn't an accident. It was premeditated. Dad and I knew 2 weeks before she left, Emily emphasized. Ryan's wife, Rachel, warned us. That's why we had video footage ready within an hour of serving them the lawsuits. Boys, you need to understand, Mom didn't just betray Dad. She betrayed all of us. I looked at my children. I'm seeing a doctor tomorrow to get tested for STDs, I admitted. Their stunned faces said it all. I can't be sure she didn't have other lovers on the side. This may be the first time she's been caught, but her frequent business trips raise suspicions. Dad, you can't be serious, Lloyd protested. There's no way Mom had other lovers. Given what we'd learned, I countered, can we trust her to tell the truth? I left them to process the information, excusing myself to get a coffee. My parents, who had been listening from the sidelines, agreed with my approach. You're handling this wisely, Marcus, my father remarked. Given her job and all those trips, it's plausible she had other partners. Meetings, business trips. They could have provided plenty of opportunities, I added. Even if she had separate phones, those calls might have gone unnoticed. A call interrupted our conversation, and I stepped out onto the veranda to answer. Hi, Rachel. What's going on? Rachel told me about her a conversation with Ryan. It didn't go well, she said. He still doesn't understand why I'm divorcing him. He thinks I should just forgive and forget. But I made it clear I don't want him in our daughter's life anymore. That's when it hit him how much damage his actions caused. She also mentioned Tiffany was struggling now that she was unemployed. They'll be back Thursday to settle everything. I've blocked Tiffany's number, and the receptionist is turning down her calls. I even sent her the video you gave me, so she knows we're all aware, Rachel added. Ryan's stuff is in the garage until he picks it up, and I've changed the locks. We exchanged a few more words before saying goodnight. I returned to the kitchen where my family awaited my next move. I'm taking tomorrow off, I announced. I have a lawyer appointment at 9 o'clock. I want those two served with lawsuits as soon as they touch down. Tears welled up in my son's eyes as the gravity of the situation sank in. My father spoke up. Ryan won't be the first, but he will be the last, he said firmly. That's not true, Lloyd protested. Mom denied it until we showed her the video. You're clueless, my mother interjected. Ever wonder why your father never spoke to Uncle Rick until now? They patched things up last Sunday. Emily added, Rick admitted Dad didn't deserve what happened back then, but it happened. Tensions rose as we discussed the family's history. I put on the kettle, giving my children time to process everything. Later, after my sons left, I sat down with my parents for a quiet heart-to-heart. They'll be watching how you handle this, my mom warned. What you do now will guide them. I understand, Mom, I replied. I'll stay calm and let the lawyers take care of things. I can't change the past, but I can control how I respond moving forward. At the lawyer's office the next day, I laid out the events leading to this point. Her ears perked up when I mentioned Tiffany's employer. "Did you know I once worked for that firm?" she asked. "They have a strict code of ethics. We might consider suing the firm as well. Though we might not gain much besides covering legal fees, it would still cause significant issues for them." I agreed to move forward. They'll be back from LA on the earliest Thursday flight out of St. Louis. After paying her fee, she seemed eager to take the case. I felt a bit like David facing Goliath. The company Tiffany worked for was the biggest in the area, with multiple divisions. Later, at the doctor's office, my family doctor seemed surprised by my request for STI tests. Though unexpected, he agreed it was a smart move. Meanwhile, I learned Cole had informed his mother about my tests. He didn't hold back, telling her that because of Rick and Ryan, there was still uncertainty about how far her betrayals went. That evening, Rachel and I met for dinner at Red Lobster. She greeted me with a warm smile, and we chatted casually. As we sat down, Rachel passed me an envelope containing statements from 5 of Ryan's former subordinates. They detailed how he'd coerced them into inappropriate situations. "This strengthens our case," I remarked. "Originally, my lawyer thought just covering her fees would be enough, but now it looks like we could expose a wider pattern of misconduct." Rachel and I bonded over our shared experiences. As I returned home close to midnight, I reflected on how much had changed since Tiffany left. Later that night, I made tea for Emily and noticed tears in her eyes. I handed her a cup and said, "It's okay to let it out. Crying is part of healing." She hugged me tightly, releasing the pent-up emotions. By the time we finished our tea, she had calmed down. Curious about my dinner with Rachel, Emily asked a few questions. I explained that we were just getting to know each other, and it felt like the beginning of a solid friendship. The next day, I dropped off the statements with my lawyer, who proposed turning the case into a class action lawsuit. I agreed, hoping it would bring more accountability. Later, I heard that Tiffany and Ryan's return wasn't smooth. Despite the settlement, their actions had made headlines, overshadowing any sense of victory. On my way home, I withdrew some cash and surprised my mom with $1,000. She gave me a look only a mother could give. "It's to help with the extra expenses while we're staying here," I explained. "It would have cost me way more anywhere else. This is a one-time thing." "Agreed," she said sternly. I nodded, grateful for her support. Tiffany returned to an empty house, feeling like an outcast. After enduring a day full of hostility, both she and Ryan were unwelcome. Her husband, Marcus, and his attorney were suing the entire firm, and Tiffany couldn't comprehend how Marcus had found a former employee to represent him, someone who would never have made partner otherwise. It wasn't just about the lawsuit, but the fact that Marcus had hired someone familiar with all the firm's legal tricks, putting them at a disadvantage from the start. After mixing herself a stiff cocktail, Tiffany sat down and started reading through the divorce petition. The reality hit her hard. Marcus and Emily had known about her and Ryan's plans when they left for Los Angeles. Now she had to face the end of her marriage, feeling regretful. Texted Marcus and Emily, realizing the damage was irreparable. She hoped to buy some time, thinking if Marcus calmed down, they might talk. But Cole's words echoed in her mind. Her actions now seemed deceitful to everyone, and it wasn't worth the pain she was causing. While sorting through the mail, Tiffany found a letter from the county health department revealing she'd contracted an STD. Overwhelmed, she broke down in tears, realizing this nightmare was only worsening. Her past business trip encounters would now make her family think even less of her. Meanwhile, Ryan sat at a dimly lit bar on the edge of town, drowning his sorrows. Rachel had filed for divorce, and as he reflected on everything, he didn't even notice the man who'd quietly taken a seat beside him. Suddenly, a commotion erupted, and in the chaos, Ryan was hit 3 times in the face. The assailant's words echoed Marcus's resentment, making it clear why he'd been attacked. Back at my father's barn, I was working on some chores one Saturday afternoon when my eldest son, Cole, showed up. His stubbornness was evident. After comforting his distraught mother, he was insistent I should take her back for the sake of peace, despite the havoc her actions had caused. Realizing there was no point in arguing, I let him vent until he was done. "Cole," I began, "imagine you were married and you found out your wife was being unfaithful. Would you still be giving the same advice?" His silence spoke volumes. I continued, "You're telling me to accept being with someone who betrayed me. Does that mean you think I'm insignificant? Someone to be walked over?" The shock on his face was undeniable. Seeing his distress, I said firmly, "If you can't respect my decisions, then don't come back." I left him standing there, knowing he needed time to process what I'd said. He turned to his Uncle Rick for advice, who admitted, "Cole, your mother came after me, not the other way around. I fell for her, and it led to 18 years of separation from my brother. There are two sides to every story. Your dad is right. Your mother didn't get that STD from Ryan. She brought it home, showing she didn't value your father after everything he did for this family. Fix this before you lose your dad forever." Monday morning at the firm where Tiffany and Ryan worked, the atmosphere was triumphant. My lawsuit had been dropped, and they were back in good standing, receiving praise for their successful case settlements. Despite his injuries from the bar fight, Ryan pressed on, privately sharing the ordeal with Tiffany. Later that day, as I exited the nursing home, I found Tiffany waiting by my car. She looked exhausted and defeated. "Back off, Tiffany," I snapped. "Ryan's got enough problems, thanks to your little revenge scheme." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I replied, playing it cool. "He jumped me," she insisted. "The guy said he was your friend, and that we kept doing it." I couldn't help but laugh. Once I composed myself, I said, "If I knew who did it, I'd buy them a whiskey. Your lover got off easy. If it were me, he'd be dead." Just then, I got an urgent text from Rachel asking me to come over right away. I quickly told Tiffany, "Get your lawyer and finalize the divorce." Without another word, I drove off, done with her lies and manipulations. When I arrived at Rachel's place, she looked visibly upset. "What's wrong?" I asked. "One of your dad's friends punched Ryan, using your name," she explained. I couldn't hide my grin, which brought some relief to Rachel's face. "Aren't you mad?" she asked. "Nope," I replied. "I just wish I knew where he lives so I could send him a bottle of whiskey." Rachel chuckled as I hugged her briefly. Before I could apologize, she surprised me with a kiss on the cheek. "They're both inside waiting to talk to you," she said, leading me into the kitchen, still holding my hand. Her two daughters, Lucia and Lisa, peeked out from their room, and I gave them a playful wink, which they returned. Rachel's father, a tall, imposing man, greeted me with a smile. I extended my hand, saying, "If I could, I'd send you a big bottle of whiskey as a thank you." He accepted the handshake, adding, "Think before you do anything foolish. My dad's advice saved me trouble when I was your age." With the tension eased, formal introductions followed, and soon it was time for him to take his grandson home. That left Rachel, her daughters, and me. The girls excitedly introduced themselves, telling me about their favorite restaurant, an all-you-can-eat pizza place called Papados. Kneeling down, I asked, "How about I treat you and your mom to dinner there?" They eagerly agreed, likely influenced by my casual attire. "Just give me a second to call my mom and let her know I won't be home for dinner," I said, smiling. At the restaurant, Rachel's colleagues waved as she grabbed more pizza. Meanwhile, Lucia turned to me. "Are you Mom's boyfriend?" she asked. I smiled and replied, "I'm just a guy, her friend." "Did you go on a date?" she pressed. "Not yet, but I need permission from someone special first," I teased. "Who?" Lisa asked curiously. "From you and your sister," I said, which made them laugh. They giggled and said, "You can, because Mom already says she likes you." By the time Rachel returned with more food, we were all in good spirits. Lisa asked if I could get her dessert, and after we finished up, I thanked them at their front door. The girls hurried inside, ready for bed. Feeling a bit awkward, I prepared to say goodnight, but Rachel called after me, stopping me on the steps. She leaned in and kissed me. Rachel, grinning, revealed that my daughter had told her she expected a date proposal. I clarified to Rachel that while Lucia's prediction was off, The thought had crossed my mind during our porch conversation, where we'd talked like teenagers about our feelings and potential future. With September nearing its end, we made plans to take the girls to the town fair the following Saturday, deciding to discuss our next step afterwards. Arriving back at my parents' farm near 10 o'clock p.m., Emily immediately picked up on my cheerful disposition. "Looks like Dad's got a big grin," she commented, adding that the meeting must have been significant. I filled my parents and Emily in on the day's happenings. My dad was amused by Tiffany's request that I stay away from Ryan. I also shared the news that on Friday, my lawyer had initiated a new lawsuit against the firm. The senior partners and 16 women were jointly named in the suit, which was personally delivered to the partners' homes. 3 of the partners were reportedly prohibited from returning home by their wives. Linda O'Neill, my attorney, was tirelessly pursuing information, even going so far as to identify Tiffany's divorce lawyer. Mom had even emailed Tiffany's family, informing them of the lawsuit against Tiffany and Ryan, revealing Tiffany's history of infidelity during business trips, and mentioning my STD diagnosis. While I prepared to pick up Rachel and her daughters for the fair, Emily remarked, "You're really into Rachel, aren't you, Dad?" I admitted that since the divorce began, many of my and Mom's mutual friends had drifted away. My shared experiences with Rachel had created a strong bond and fostered trust. While unsure of the future, I was open to possibilities. Emily teased, "If you need dating tips, just ask. Just promise to introduce us before things get serious." At the fair, I spent an hour on the Ferris wheel with Rachel's daughters, who loved every minute. We all enjoyed plenty of fair food, with Lisa riding on my shoulders for most of the time. Later, we ran into Rick and his wife, Mary, along with their children. The kids connected instantly, leaving the adults to catch up. By 6 p.m., the girls were exhausted. After bath time and tucking them into bed, Rachel received a call from Ryan, who was in the ER again after being punched. Rachel assured him I wasn't involved, as I'd spent the day with her and the girls at the fair. Ryan wasn't happy. I left Rachel's around 9 o'clock p.m., feeling that our relationship was progressing. Sunday afternoon, I picked up Rachel and her daughters, and we headed to Rick's house. My entire family was there, including Emily, who had brought a date. It was a significant moment for Rick, having me in his home for the first time since his marriage. Mary warmly welcomed Rachel and her girls, and they were quickly made to feel at home. Things shifted when Cole pulled me aside. "Dad, I messed up," he admitted. "I fell for Mom's manipulation. She tricked me. Uncle Rick and my colleagues filled me in last week." "What did you learn from this?" I asked, curious about his takeaway. "When it comes to family," Cole said, "sometimes it's best to keep your distance. No matter what you do, you might just make things worse. They need to figure things out on their own time, not yours." "You're right, but it's tough because we care so much," I admitted. "Your mom and I will talk one day, but not anytime soon considering her recent behavior." Cole nodded. "Yeah, her behavior speaks for itself. Look at Rachel," I continued. "She endured a loveless marriage until she felt ready to raise her daughters on her own. She showed patience until the time was right. Her actions reflect her character. Your mom's behavior shocked Emily and me with its cruelty. She says one thing, but her actions tell a different story. As Grandpa used to say, if I'm not worth the truth, then you're not worth lying to." "Dad, here's a tough question," Cole said somberly. "What else did she lie about?" "That's something we may never fully know," I replied. "There's no use dwelling on the past, son. All we can do is learn from it and move forward." "I'm really impressed by Rachel, Dad," Cole admitted. "But the more I hear about Mom and Ryan, the more I think they deserve each other." Just then, Emily approached, noticing the attention our conversation was attracting. "Maybe we can finish this later," she suggested. "We're done, sis," Cole assured her. "I just needed to apologize to Dad." With that, he walked away, leaving Emily curious. "Just a case of saying the wrong thing," I clarified. "It's good to see he owned up to it." Meanwhile, Rick and Mary were enjoying dinner with their family. Mary took several pictures, especially when Lisa stayed close to me. When the inevitable water fight erupted, I joined in enthusiastically, although it ended with me soaked and resting in a lounge chair to dry off. Lisa climbed into my lap and fell asleep. I glanced over and saw Mary and Rachel chatting, likely about the developing connection between me and her daughter. My father joined me as I relaxed. "This little one seems to have picked you," he remarked, looking at Lisa. "Just make sure revenge isn't your motive." I chuckled and recounted the progression of my relationship with Rachel, starting from her initial phone call. He nodded thoughtfully. I should have trusted my instincts back then. He then revealed, "Your mother asked me to talk to you. Whatever path you choose, know that we support you, Dad." "Look at the world today," I said, changing the subject. "A Democrat who echoes the values of JFK. A Democrat echoing JFK's values wins the presidency, yet conservative congressmen are resigning. The GOP now embodies Kennedy's ideals, but the media labels him a traitor and seeks impeachment despite his consistency. They support a candidate exhibiting the same behaviors they accuse him of. What message does that send?" I asked my parents. "They display the same disregard for truth and morality as my soon-to-be ex-wife. Values only matter when someone's behind bars. Then they feign remorse." Dad laughed. "People ought to flush 100% of the media's truths down the toilet. Real honesty is hard to find these days, but folks are too blind to see it. It's amazing to watch two Democrat factions at each other's throats. Despite all the opposition, it makes me wonder if their real problem with him is that he's too competent." "Strong words, Marcus," Dad said, "but it highlights the media's power as a propaganda tool." The following Monday, a detective visited my office regarding the ongoing Ryan situation. I spent an hour detailing everything I knew, providing a list of women whose husbands had discovered Ryan's affairs. "Officer," I said, "you should speak with Linda O'Neill. She has more details. It's been over 6 weeks since I learned about their relationship. Ryan's wife, Rachel, was the one who tipped me off." The detective took notes. "Ryan seems to blame you for ruining his marriage," he observed. "It sounds like he's the type who shirks responsibility for his own actions." After the detective left, I called Linda to give her a heads up. She anticipated this from Ryan, believing him capable of framing others and suspecting him as the reason behind her dismissal from the firm. That evening, back at my parents' house, I learned it was my mother's letter that finally pushed Tiffany to give up. Until then, she'd believed reconciliation was possible. On Wednesday, Emily and I took Rachel and her daughters to dinner at the Pasta House, and my sons joined us. I shared the news of Tiffany finally hiring a divorce lawyer. Rachel's daughters were delighted with Emily's company, making the dinner a success. 2 months after our last family meeting, on Friday afternoon, I sat beside Linda O'Neill in court, waiting to be called before Judge Robin McCullough. Across from us sat Tiffany and her lawyer from the firm. We'd already agreed on property division, and with no mortgage, it was straightforward. Tiffany would buy out my share of the house and give me half of our joint savings. Before the judge, we confirmed our agreement, finalizing the divorce. On the steps outside, Tiffany stopped me. "I ruined myself," she said. "I finally admitted everything to the boys, and Emily still won't speak to me. She thinks I did all of this on purpose." "I could accept that explanation from Emily due to her inexperience," I replied. "But from an adult, it sounds superficial." Rachel's divorce was already finalized, and she'd received everything possible from Ryan. He was ordered to pay $1,000 monthly child support, $1,500 for each child until they turned 18, and half of their college expenses. Their house was to be sold, and the profits split. Ryan had left the company and moved to another city, likely tired of confrontations with angry individuals. With his share of the firm, he was financially secure. One evening, my parents invited Rachel and her girls for dinner, and surprisingly, her parents as well. With our relationship growing serious, they felt it was time for families to meet. Linda O'Neill had negotiated with the firm's insurance company, and it appeared our case would settle out of court. After paying Linda her 30%, we were each set to receive over $750,000. That night, around the formal dining room table, unused for years, I stood, pushed back my chair, and knelt, presenting a small box. "Rachel," I asked, "will you take a second chance and marry me?" Completely shocked, Rachel said yes. The real celebration began. Mom called Rick, Mary, and my sons to share the news, and they arrived within half an hour. Amidst the excitement, I noticed Lisa sitting quietly on the floor, tears in her eyes. I sat beside her, and she climbed into my lap. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked gently. "Nothing," she whispered. "I'm just happy you're going to be my dad." I looked at Rachel, tears in her eyes mirroring my own. I stood, holding Lisa, and walked to her mother. Everyone understood the significance of that moment. Lucia joined us. "Dad," she asked softly, "when you and Mom get married, will we take your last name too?" "As soon as the court allows," I promised. Lucia and Lisa turned to my father, who smiled. "From now on, you can call us Grandma and Grandpa." I envisioned my daughters at the farm, learning to ride horses with my dad. They would love it. Later in private, Rachel asked, "How will you convince Ryan to let you adopt the girls and change their last name?" "Leave that to me," I said confidently. A month later, I showed up at Ryan's. I went to Ryan's office unannounced. His secretary sent me right in. His face had healed, but the damage from the 8 punches he'd received was still visible. Despite the detective interviewing all his former lovers and their husbands, no solid suspects had emerged. "I think you've heard that Rachel and I are getting married," I began. His face paled. He clearly believed I was behind his injuries. "What do you want?" he asked nervously. "I need your permission to legally adopt your daughters so they can take my last name." Lucia asked her mother and me if she and her sister could take my name. "This needs to be legally recognized, with both of us as their fathers." "Why should I agree?" he asked. "Because if you do, I'll stay out of your life for good," I stated. "If you don't, well, we might cross paths a lot more." It took him 30 minutes to type and sign the document. His secretary, also a notary, stamped it. I knew he didn't care much for the girls, having not seen them since leaving for Los Angeles. Later, I stopped by Rachel's school. I had to go through the office as they didn't know me. When they called her classroom, she came to the office surprised. "Rachel, I made a promise to your daughters the day I proposed," I said, handing her an envelope. "I think this will help us give them what they want." Her eyes filled with tears as she read the document. "How did you manage this?" she asked. "Ryan still believes I'm responsible for his encounter with those fists," I said. "I used that to our advantage. I thought, we can make it official on our wedding day. Lucia and Lisa can legally take my last name." Emily had been right. When I make a promise, especially to a child, I keep it. That afternoon, we met with Linda to finalize the adoption papers. Preparing and filing the documents took only 20 minutes. A week later, we learned the adoption would be approved, and the girls would officially become walkers. We held a family meeting to announce that in 2 weeks, 6 days before Christmas, Rachel and I would marry, and the adoption would be finalized. Lucia and Lisa were overjoyed, and my parents were eager to welcome their new granddaughters. That night, by the fire, Lucia climbed into my lap and said, "Thank you, Dad, for loving us enough to keep your promise." I couldn't speak, so I just held her tightly, grateful for the family we were building together.